Okay, so I got great, really helpful advice from the various reviewers, but there was one piece of advice that I did take that I regret taking, and that was changing the title of the paper. I think it's a bit too long and wordy now, but nonetheless, it says what it does on the tin, if you see what I mean. Does what it or whatever the word does what it says on the tin. So, understanding and mitigating the effects of device and cloud service design decisions on the environmental footprint of digital infrastructure. That's what we're going to talk about. And just to give you a feel for what the overall message is, it really follows on well from the previous paper. The previous paper was about green designers. And there's a lot of green designers around who focus on things like smartphones, etc. But I have not seen strong evidence of green designers in software, particularly green designers that think about services that span the entirety of the internet. And so really, this paper is a call that if you're a designer, particularly if you're a software designer, and particularly if you're working in companies, can you get the concept of green design, sustainability, into the thought process of the design for software. That's the key message. Particularly, I'm thinking about the digital infrastructure. And so this is what I mean. Just to be clear what I mean by the digital infrastructure. The digital infrastructure is the whole of the internet and everything else that is used to provide the services that we have. So it used to be that when we received services, when we used a piece of software, we just used a laptop, a computer, a desktop, whatever. More and more, that was back in the 70s. Now, more and more, there is more and more infrastructure is being used to provide the services that we receive. Obviously, the internet, we have the core of the internet, various data centers, content distribution networks, edge networks, access networks, wireless networks, local Wi-Fi, the end devices, peripherals such as cameras, the wireless repeaters and Internet of Things technology. There's lots of stuff, basically. There's lots of stuff. And when you design a service, you are having an impact in terms of, it's not only the device that your service runs on, but the environmental impact spreads throughout this infrastructure. And the infrastructure is significant. If we look at, this is figures for the year 2007, based on work from the Industrial Ecology Journal, by Malmedin and others from Ericsson, and they looked at what is the total environmental impact per year of digital technology. What's the total environmental impact, both of energy use and also the sales, the environmental impact of the manufacture of those kits. And they came up with, for the end-user devices, laptops, desktops, smartphones, etc., it's about 278 megatons of CO2e, and the networks and data centers are slightly less than that, about 253 megatons of CO2e. And this is a substantial amount. It's about 1.5% of the global emissions, overall global carbon emissions, so it's non-trivial. And so what's interesting is that digital technology of all sectors, business sectors, digital technology is the one where things are becoming more efficient most rapidly. In fact, we're getting a kind of efficiency improvements of about 100 times per decade in terms of how much computational power you get for your watt, how much computational power you get for the same amount of energy. So if you compare that with something like aviation, aviation is only producing a 1% performance improvement roughly every year. So digital technology is going vastly faster in terms of the efficiency improvements that we're gaining. But nonetheless, despite that, our overall energy consumption is going up. So we're getting more efficient. We're getting more efficient very quickly, but our overall energy consumption is going up. And so we need to think about that. As technologists, we need to think about that, because in the long term, this is not sustainable. And so we need to incorporate this concept into what we're doing. So why is it going up? So one of the reasons, basically the key reason that it's going up is that the same technological improvements, Moore's law primarily, which result in an improvement in efficiency of computation, also results in a drastic reduction in cost, miniaturization, and as a result of that, it means more things are possible, more services are possible, at lower costs, so more people can buy them. And we have a spirit. So understandably, we have basically user-centered designers who think about what users want, working together with customer-driven businesses who want to make money out of what users want, together with our culture, which is pervasive throughout the world, throughout the Western world and also beyond, where culture of individuality, choice, and convenience naturally leads designers to want to provide faster, more pervasive digital services. So they basically, the designers want to give you what you want, we will buy what we want, and therefore we end up using more technology. We have more services spread out for more people over the world, and basically, as a result, the efficiency improvements get mopped up by increased consumption of these services. So what we talk about is the cornucopian design paradigm, which is what designers of services have these days. The cornucopian is the horn of plenty from Greek myth, and that is based on the idea that whatever you want will be given to you. And as a result of this, we design a number of characteristics into our services which people genuinely want. So that it's quite right that we want these things. We want more personal services. We want more varied services. We want services that are instant on demand. We want services which are shareable. We want services which are pervasive. We want to have continuous access to our services. We want, when we create content, we want it to last forever. Nonetheless, we want to create content which is ephemeral, isn't very important. We want to create content which is just for a bit of a laugh, and maybe doesn't need to last forever. And also we want rich, cross-modal and ubiquitous services. So all these things together mean that when a designer designs, they want to give us what we want, and as a result, use more of the technology. So we've looked at before at design for environment. The previous talk was primarily on design for environment. This is an example of Fairphone, an organization which uses design for environment intimately, as well as design for social good. As I've said, the key message that I want to get across to you is that we don't use design for environment on digital services, and we should think about how to do this. And the rest of the talk is giving some guidelines about how this can be done. So it's very common in organizations like Hewlett-Packard, Apple, etc., to have design for environment of devices, but not for digital services. And what we believe that should be done, not in this paper, but in other papers we've written, it's important to create quantitative models of digital services to help you identify where in the digital service the energy is being used and the resources are being used. And if you can do that, you can think about where to target your design interventions to allow those services to be more efficient. You can identify the hotspots. What I want to present today, so that's part of our work, but what I want to focus on today is an extension of Blevis's work on the sustainable interaction design. He introduced something called the rubric of material effects in his original paper on sustainable interaction design, and we want to extend it to help people think. His was focused on a single device, designing a single device. What we want to do is make people think beyond that, to think about not only the device, but the whole infrastructure that is providing the services that come through that device. So, Ellie's work was focused around this rubric. So we introduced what we call the rubric of infrastructural effects. And the rubric, which originally Dan was telling me last night, so I got a little picture there that we found on the internet. Rubric is originally, comes from the red writing that was in sacred texts to emphasize certain things that were important, key questions or key recommendations of how one should behave. And so Ellie, he gave a set of questions which designers were intended to bear in mind when they were thinking about the design of digital products. And we expand on those by adding further questions for designers to help them think about the design decisions they are making and the effect on the infrastructure. So here they are. We're going to go through them. So first of all, does the design encourage expansion or obsolescence of the infrastructure? And here's some examples of services which in different ways do encourage expansion of the infrastructure. So first of all, we have SurfCam, a service which allows you to see the surf on different beaches. And as a result of that, high-definition cameras are being deployed around the world on various different beaches. So if you want to think about the footprint of SurfCam, you need to consider the fact that new cameras are being added around the world to provide this service. Secondly, we have, as you introduce the Internet of Things more around the place, for example, Internet-enabled televisions, Internet-enabled fridges, etc., then it means that you need more connectivity around the home. In particular, whereas maybe we used to be able to live with a Wi-Fi signal which would go from the living room to the bedroom upstairs, more and more we need to have repeaters around the place to make sure that we have Wi-Fi signals around the whole house. Whereas we used to be happy just locally, we need them more and more because there's so many more devices that require connectivity to Wi-Fi. So that increases the spread of the infrastructure. And then also there's some which increase the amount of infrastructure that's needed because they increase the demand on the particular pieces of infrastructure. So if you take video on demand, Netflix, BBC iPlayer, etc., then these are resulting effectively in a step change in what is expected of the underlying infrastructure. If you look at the amount, if you look at projections and current data on how much of the core network is being used for video transmission, you find that basically a large proportion of the core network is being used for video transmission. So the core network is primarily a tool for entertainment, for consumer entertainment these days. Back in the 80s and 90s, the core network was initially a tool for research, then it was a tool for business transactions in terms of the amount of data. Now it's primarily a tool for entertainment. So entertainment services are driving the growth in core network technology. So the first question is, does it drive increased infrastructure? The next is, given that there is that infrastructure in place, what design decisions do or do not result in more use of that infrastructure? In other words, more energy being used by that infrastructure as it goes about. And I'll give you two examples. Again, going back to Netflix, we see a move from standard definition television to high definition television to 4K to 6K. Netflix, the House of Cards is now in 6K, and that is increasing the demand on the core infrastructure. Similarly, the fact that we want mobile services like Spotify and YouTube, etc., as we go around in what's called in downtime, which is an observation made last year at CHI by a paper by Caroline Lord and others, then that means we need more and more mobile connectivity. We use mobile network more intensively than we used to because we use these services. Yeah. So can we think about how to design in such a way to reduce this? So here's a few examples. BBC iPlayer, can lower resolution be default? Can we nudge people towards a lower resolution by default? BBC iPlayer offers standard definition by basic, and then you can upgrade it to high definition if you choose. But the default is standard, so we can nudge people towards standard. Maybe even estimate what quality is most useful to them given the device they're looking at and their tastes. HipChat is a service which allows interactivity, but it does so in a way which doesn't require video. It encourages you to interact in a way using text first of all and only moving to video or audio when necessary. So it's a kind of team-based service. And then also, if we look at the Guardian mobile app, that is a system which will download, make the use of the mobile network, make your home Wi-Fi, which is an underused resource. It will download content when you're in home Wi-Fi overnight, and then when you're traveling around, you can use that content, which will reduce the overload on the mobile networks. So different design decisions can help us to think about these different things. So another good example, digital waste. Digital waste is where we have content, we download content, and we don't use it. We can design in ways which encourage it or discourage it. Again, from Lord last year, the observation that many people use YouTube as a source of sound, but nonetheless, the video will be broadcast. My daughter uses it in the background, but nonetheless that video signal comes across. And the environmental cost of that video signal is substantial. The amount of energy that's used to transfer that video signal is substantial. So that is an example of digital waste. A design from YouTube which actually reduces digital waste is above. It's the video preview. That will mean people can access exactly the right part of the video that they want to see without needing to download the whole piece or download different sections to scrub through. So that's a good example of a good design, whereas the fact that YouTube sends visuals even when only audio is required is an example of bad design. Right, so getting short of time, so I want to just skip through. I'll skip one slide. What I want to say, just to finish up with, I've spoken so far taking an eco-efficiency perspective, which is the idea that, that we should make things more efficient, but not worry too much about not giving people what they want. There are other paradigms that sustainable HCI has discussed, which I discuss in the paper, and present rubric questions which are more radical. The eco-efficiency assumes that we stay with the system we have and don't go further. But there's one that I think that companies should be asking even now. Eco-efficiency is well recognized by companies, and as you said earlier on, there's many green designers that will focus on eco-efficiency. So we should be doing that for digital services now, and I hope more companies do take that up. But there is another question which companies should be asking, and that is digital living within planetary boundaries. Basically, the concept that there are limits which we need to stay within. The planetary boundaries, there are limits. If you're deploying a digital service or a digital infrastructure, the question is, if we provide a service of that level to the whole of the world, all 8 billion of us, can we do it within environmental constraints? And if the answer was aviation, if we were all going to fly as much as those of us in the West fly, the answer would be clearly no. That is just impossible. In the case of digital services, the answer might be yes. I say might be. It's not a definite yes. It's possible that the increase in efficiency that we have, smart design techniques, etc., can allow a quality of digital service to be spread around the whole world. We need to do the sums. We don't know for sure. We don't know, but it is feasible. But what we need to do is understand whether that is possible, and to the extent it's not possible, we need to think about how to reduce service level in a way that provides people's needs as best as possible around the world. So that is digital living within planetary boundaries. In the paper, I discussed some other examples of more radical perspectives and give some examples there. But I'm finishing there. Thank you very much.
Can you talk a little bit about incentives, in particular economic incentives? So, for example, in the United States, the predominant internet plans for homes have no obvious bandwidth caps. And so streaming YouTube all the time, for example, and not watching it is no problem for most people.
Yeah. So, well, I must admit, so I don't think that there should be. So this is very interesting. Again, compared with aviation. If you compare IT with aviation, they're roughly the same size sectors, okay, in terms of the amount of the environmental impact of the sectors. But they're very different in that aviation, a very small number of us fly, whereas IT, 40% of us have access to the internet in our homes. And if you go beyond that, it's going to be over the world, through the world, you're going to get about 80% of people have some form of internet access. So it means that each of our contributions are going to be quite small to this overall footprint, even though the whole overall footprint is quite big. And so that means the economic incentive does not need to be applied to the individual because it's going to be so small it doesn't affect the individual's behavior. Okay? That means it is the economic incentive needs to be applied to the companies, and you can already see this happening in the case of the data centers. The data centers, it clearly is in Google's interests, as we were saying earlier, to have green data centers which use energy less, and they've done a fantastic job of doing that, and they've spread their knowledge, so all credit to them. They've done a great job there. However, it's less clearly in their interest to reduce emissions associated with the mobile networks, and that requires more partnerships. And I hope that will happen. There's already some evidence that Google might do that sort of thing, partnerships. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Very interesting talk. I was wondering, on a perhaps similar note, whether you looked at the situations where the cost for the company is not necessarily going in the same direction as the cost for the environment. So if you save energy, that's fine. But what about, say, revenue streams that come from displaying advertising?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I think the answer is, it clearly at the moment is the case that there are examples where a customer will consider something waste, but the company will feel that they have to put it there. And I think we see it all the time. We get these 15-second compulsory adverts, etc. Yeah. And that the value needs to be somewhere in the system. And so, unfortunately, we're going to have to live with that, at least in the eco-efficiency paradigm. In the long term, it might well be that if we want to live within environmental limits, we actually need to reduce the amount of video advertising that's used.
Yeah, I was wondering if policy is something to take also into account in that context.
Yeah, so the policy, again, I think at the moment there isn't a drive in that case, but one could imagine that in future, yeah. Appropriate advertising online.